Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 10th of October, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that very easily online at weather.gov/Alaska, or localize your experience by starting out at the Fairbanks Weather Forecast Office, Anchorage Forecast Office, or Juneau, or the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, or the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. All of those, just change the last name there, scrub off Alaska, and substitute any of those names, and you'll find what you're looking for very quickly in that way. You can always find the Alaska Weather TV images online as well. More on that anytime just by clicking on any of those sites, and it'll help you get in that direction. 1-800-472-0391 is the way to find the Alaska weather information on your telephone. Save those numbers and dial them faster the next time. And if you have any questions about what you find or what you can't find online or from any of our National Weather Service products or services around the state, please do let me know. I'm happy to help you any way I can. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is the easiest way to reach me. A winter storm warning continues for the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, mainly the higher terrain above 2,000 feet. That'll go until midnight tonight, where snowfall could total up to 7 inches or so. So a decent snowfall happening across some of the higher terrain out west. Coastal flood advisories also continue around some areas, or high surf advisory, I should say, across some of the northern sections of the Seward Peninsula coastline and the Chukchi coast. That could bring some surf up to about 3 feet above normal high tides there. That'll continue through midnight as well. A big push of wind coming in across the north and western part of the state. So high surf expected to ease up a little bit more as we head into the overnight hours, but until midnight or so, that could still be a little rough. And then a coastal flood watch for areas across the Norton Sound region and the Yukon Delta and the Bering Sea coast. It looks like the next wave will be working in that direction, pushing another surge of wind and possibly some water into Thursday night and Friday. So we'll be watching for that as we head toward the end of the week, and you'll see why here in just a minute. We'll look out further west. Already shows a high wind warning for the western Aleutians. That will start up tonight and into tomorrow, as winds are expected to howl out there across places like Shemya and Attu as the next Bering Sea low bombs out across the western Bering Sea. And again, starts that push of wind and water toward the east. So again, that coastal flood watch is posted. Here's a look at the overall weather picture. Looks like low pressure is certainly in control of Alaska at this point. You can see low here across northwestern Alaska. That's moving very quickly eastward. And another wave of low pressure quickly developing south of the Aleutians. Now, what you're not seeing is a whole lot of cloud cover across southeast. The folks in southeast are looking up and going, wow, what is that? It's a flaming ball of gas, and it's so bright. It is. Enjoy it. And it looks like it's going to stay that way, at least for the next couple days, until the whole weather pattern shifts. But for right now, most of the weather is tracking from southwest to north and east, taking snow into parts of the interior. Again, Fairbanks picking up its first measurable snowfall of the season. And out west, plenty of cloud cover, moisture, rain, and wind for the west coast. It looks like that trend will continue for the next several days. And the next onslaught of Bering Sea low pressure is developing right now west of Shemya. As of earlier this afternoon, it was only around 990 millibars, but expected to deepen substantially to about 956 millibars by this time tomorrow. So a big weather maker there. You can see snow falling across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, rain and snow for the interior. Places like Bettles picking up snow and wind throughout the daytime today. Rain and wind across parts of the west coast, and then you head out to the west around the Pribilofs, and you're looking at rain and fog, and plenty of fog across the Aleutians, with low pressure well to the west, high pressure across the central and southern Gulf, and beautiful blue sky across southeastern Alaska this afternoon. For tonight, snow showers mainly across higher terrain. It doesn't look like a lot of this is going to reach down to levels that most of us are living right now. However, as you get up into the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, you don't have to go that high up to get into some of that snow. 2,000 feet there, and some areas around the Fairbanks region may still see snow showers in the vicinity there, but the bulk of that accumulating snow should be winding down. Out west, rainfall across the YK Delta into Norton Sound, out across the western end of the Seward Peninsula. And then here's our low pressure system tonight, dropping already to 967 millibars. You can see the tight pressure gradient developing across the Aleutians, developing across the Alaska Peninsula, and certainly across the western Bering Sea by tomorrow afternoon. A 956 millibar low there, low pressure bringing the occlusion well into the Gulf of Anadyr. The triple point, the warm, the cold, and the wrapping up of that air right here just to the north and west of Nunivak Island and right over St. Lawrence Island, so there will be wind with that. And again, we're watching for coastal flood potential here as we head into Thursday and Friday for the Bering Sea coast. Looks like there will be more snow as you head into the Brooks Range, and rain and snow for the central and northern interior high country. South central still looking at generally dry weather. Southeast still fairly dry. Showers forming offshore though, small crafts possible as we head into Wednesday. Out west it's going to be wind for the central and western chain especially. A high wind warning will be in effect for Shemya. And winds are going to come up for the Alaska Range. No warnings, watches for you just yet, but do expect turbulent conditions. Flying weather will be degraded rapidly as we head into Wednesday and Thursday, so watch for poor conditions across the west coast. You can see the core of low pressure here now just south of the Gulf of Anadyr on Thursday. Another wave of low pressure develops just south and west of the Kenai Peninsula and over Kodiak Island with high pressure in charge of southeast. Everything's looking good there, but rain will spread back into south central. Rain and snow for the central and northern interior, the south facing slopes of the Brooks Range, and even the coastal plain. We'll be looking at more snow there. So an awful lot going on as we head toward the end of the week. And of course, once this passes, a decent surge of cold air drops in for next week. So watch for that. As we head into Wednesday morning, watch for periods of temperatures in the 30s and even 40s across parts of southeast, south central, upper 30s and lower 40s, 43 in Kodiak. The middle Tanana Valley is going to bounce right back to about 34 degrees to start your daytime tomorrow. Look at the colder weather up here across the upper Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon, upper 20s to about 30 degrees. Arctic Village, you're dropping to about 16 for tomorrow morning. Mid-20s for most of the North Slope. For areas around Kotzebue Sound, you'll hover just above freezing there. Wind and 35 degrees for Nome, 38 and rain for St. Lawrence Island, it looks like, and for most of the YK Delta, temperatures will hover in the mid to upper 30s, even lower 40s as we get into the morning hours there. McGrath, 38 degrees, south central, upper 30s and lower 40s. For the Alaska Peninsula, the Pribilofs, Adak and Atka, about 50 degrees or so, maybe just a hair cooler in the upper 40s, and 45 degrees out around Shemya. Here's a look at Wednesday afternoon. Remember, a lot of wind and rain working into the west coast. So temperatures are going to stay up there, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be very comfortable. Mid-40s around Nome, 40 for Shishmaref, 30s as you go up the Chukchi Seacoast, and very close to, if not right below freezing, around Kaktovik. For the central and eastern interior, upper 30s to about 40 degrees. That includes areas around Fairbanks. South central, mid to upper 40s, maybe 50 degrees as you head down toward Homer and Seward. Kodiak, 51. Lower 50s for most of southeast. Haines and Skagway in the mid-50s there. Yakutat could be cooler at 48. Ketchikan and Annette closer to 50 degrees. The YK Delta in the upper 40s to about 50. St. Lawrence Island around 44. The Alaska Peninsula lower to mid-50s. Look at Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, 57 degrees on that stiff southerly wind. By Thursday morning, expect low temperatures again to drop off into the mid-40s. For southwest and Bristol Bay, Dillingham, King Salmon, you're looking at mid-40s by Thursday morning. About 45 for Bethel, 41 in Nome. Upper 20s it looks like for many areas for the Chukchi Coast. The Beaufort Sea Coast could be even colder though, mid-20s there. That's going to help promote more of that ice to form across the northern coast. For the upper Yukon Valley and the upper Tanana Valley, Eagle and Northway, gosh, even Chicken, mid-20s. Could be a cool start for you on Thursday. South Central, we're expecting lows back in the mid to upper 30s, so still generally above freezing as we go throughout the day. 46 as we get into Kodiak, and southeast, you'll start your Thursday morning back in the mid to upper 30s, lower 40s across the outer coast. On to Thursday afternoon now, and you can see the cold setting in across the higher terrain of the Brooks Range. Upper 20s there around Arctic Village, lower 30s for the Beaufort Sea Coast. Barrow 33, Kotzebue Sound temperatures in the lower 40s. Shishmaref about 42, Kivalina 41. Nome, you're looking at temperatures back in the mid-40s. The YK Delta should see high temperatures on Thursday, still in the upper 40s to almost 50 degrees into the Bristol Bay region. 52 in Kodiak, lower 50s for places like Pilot Point and Port Heiden, all the way down towards Sandpoint at 52. And on Alaska into Harbor, 51. Southeast, upper 40s and lower 50s. Southeast, south central, closer to that 50-degree mark. More cold is on the way for next week. We'll have more on that coming up.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
With a large Bering Sea storm working from west to northeast, it's going to spread more poor visibility and lower ceilings across the west coast on top of turbulence and changing weather conditions for the interior. Up north, colder weather will also be a factor with this, as well as the strong winds. Look for IFR conditions on the south-facing slopes of many of the mountain ranges as we go through the interior, as wind is blowing up from the southwest to the north across the Brooks Range. IFR conditions to start out across some of the eastern Alaska Range as well as the western Alaska Range. Southeast will start off with a generally VFR start on Wednesday morning by the afternoon. MVFR offshore will also be whittled away a little bit more. Watch for IFR to develop across the eastern and central Beaufort Seacoast as well as many areas along the west coast throughout the afternoon, and changing weather conditions will continue into Thursday. IFR spreads inland up the Yukon and the Kuskokwim River deltas and into the south-facing slopes of the higher terrain of the Seward Peninsula and Norton Sound, and also the Pacific coastline and into the southern end of Kodiak Island. Southeast looking pretty good to start there for Thursday morning, as well as most of the Copper River Valley and many of the interior valleys there, especially the upper Yukon and the North Slope. As we get into the afternoon on Thursday, still a continued good visibility and ceilings there for many in the Beaufort Seacoast, but IFR is spreading eastward toward the south and western facing slopes of the Brooks Range and the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, the south facing coast of northern Norton Sound, and many along the Alaska Range and south and west will be dealing with poor visibility and ceilings again, and not to mention the turbulence into Thursday. Still looking at good flying conditions, visibility and ceiling wise for southeast. Here's your pass conditions now in detail for Wednesday. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, we expect to see a start at IFR with improving conditions throughout your day on Wednesday. Looks like IFR to start there for Adigan Pass as well. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we're expecting to see IFR starts there with improving conditions through Wednesday, but again, watch for IFR out to the west again on Thursday. Rainy Pass to start around IFR with some improvement through the day. Windy Pass starts at marginal conditions, and we expect similar weather around Isabel Pass as we go through the midweek. Mentasta Pass leaning over to MVFR after a rough start there. And Tanita Pass looking at MVFR conditions with improvement throughout your Wednesday. Portage Pass looks to be VFR and southeast, and also Chilkoot and White Pass generally VFR throughout the day. Freezing levels indicate warm air is surging northward once again across the Bering Sea. Levels stretch as low as 2,000 feet just outside the Gulf of Anadyr to above 10,000 feet across the central chain. You can see another cool pocket here across the western Gulf, already down below 8,000 feet, and cooler weather is sinking southward. Places like Fairbanks now have already seen a fresh snow with several inches as of earlier today. Here's a look at the icing potential, and moisture is going to be wrapped well into the system here and out across the south and western coast into Norton Sound, the Gulf of Anadyr, and the Chukchi Sea. Freezing levels will be going up as that warmer air blows in. Look for levels to rise up above 10,000 feet. Out to the west, though, you can see they're dropping quickly behind the weather pattern. 7,000 to 8,000 foot ceilings developing out in the western Aleutians, and again, not ceilings, but the icing level should be referenced there. Above 9,000 feet for the interior as levels are rising as well. Most of this at least isolated moderate there. The jet stream shows a pretty pronounced ridge of high pressure across the western and interior parts of Alaska. The controlling weather maker, though, is out across the western Bering Sea. Wind speeds at the maximum level between 120 and 150 knots. Another wave of low pressure across the Pacific Northwest is drawing in west and northwesterly flow across the Gulf of Alaska. At 9,000 feet, you can see that ridge controlling really most of the Great Land at this point for Wednesday, but out west, this very large-scale circulation keeping wind speeds across the Aleutians at 50 to 70 knots and a very stiff southerly breeze across the west coast, anywhere from 35 to 40 knots. For southeast northwesterlies at 20 knots, and interior winds running between about 20 and 30. The Chukchi Seacoast looking at winds around 15 knots, a little bit more of a southeasterly flow here on Wednesday at 3,000 feet, and a pretty stiff west and southwesterly flow across the southern Bering and the western chain between 50 and 75 knots. With high pressure well south of Kodiak, we're drawing in southwesterlies into most of the mainland and northwesterlies across the eastern Gulf, with lighter winds across southeast than what we saw at this level at 9,000 feet. Look for light winds generally around the ridge there across the interior as we go through your Wednesday. Turbulence potential is really going to focus out west then as we go through your Wednesday. Watch for cases of isolated severe across any parts of the central and probably western Aleutians. As the day goes on into Wednesday night and Thursday, we may see that creep eastward into the eastern chain as well, below 3 to about 4,000 feet with considerable moderate chop across the west coast. We'll be back with a look at your marines in just a few minutes. Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the program.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
And once again, you brought some wonderful satellite pictures to show us and do a little show and tell about. It's just amazing. I can get lost in satellite pictures all day. What did you bring today?
Right. Well, weather satellites, what are they good for? Yeah. Of course, there's the pretty pictures that they bring us. You know, we've got a picture here from April of 2012. Okay. The Sumi NPP satellite, it's what they call a polar orbiter, which means it covers Alaska because we're near the pole. Beautiful image. You can see a storm off of southeast Alaska, the sea ice along the Bering Sea up into the Arctic. A really nice picture, and this is important because it allows a forecaster to see where the storms are, where the ice is, where the clear areas are. You need to know where the weather is now if you're going to forecast it into the future. Exactly. So satellites give us these good pictures. This is called surveillance of the weather. And you know, that same satellite also has another picture from a little more recently, August of 2014, Tropical Storm Iselle bearing down on the Hawaiian Islands. Hawaii doesn't get hit by a whole lot of tropical storms or hurricanes. Sometimes it does. And here's a picture from the same satellite, the Sumi NPP Polar Orbiter. It shows Tropical Storm Iselle approaching the Hawaiian Islands from the southeast. You can see the storm swirling away there, and then there's the Hawaiian Islands. This is a tropical storm, not quite as strong as a hurricane because we don't see the eye wall in there. This is still a serious weather system. And all of this information comes just from that satellite picture. It's so much information, and it's wonderful to look at. You see the beauty and the awe of nature right there depicted in that weather satellite. We call it a polar orbiter because the satellite flies high over the globe. Maybe we could look here at we happen to bring the planet Earth with us. This is our satellite. A polar orbit flies really close to the Earth, maybe 800 kilometers over the Earth, and goes up over the pole and then back down, and then the Earth spins under the satellite as it goes by. That's in contrast to the geostationary birds, which are much further out. And they don't view Alaska quite as well. So we love those polar orbiter satellites here in Alaska.
So when we're a lot closer, we get much better details and imagery and an idea of a better maybe position of what's going on when it's passing right over Alaska or right over Hawaii.
Yes, exactly right. The polar orbiter gives such a good view of places like Alaska. And because it's close to the planet, there's another aspect of satellites in the polar orbit that is helpful for weather forecasting. It's an aspect that's maybe not as immediately obvious as the pretty pictures that we see. And that is the capacity for the satellite to produce what's called a sounding. That is finding the vertical profile of temperature and moisture in the atmosphere. We've all heard of weather balloons. Weather balloons are launched here in Alaska twice a day at a number of airports, everywhere from Barrow to St. Paul Island to Kodiak, Anchorage and Fairbanks, Yakutat, a number of places. Launch these balloons, and we've got a picture of a balloon being launched at an airport, and the balloon goes up. It's pulling a little package, an instrument package with it that reports temperature, pressure, humidity data back, and we use that information to help feed what are called numerical weather prediction models.
The models.
The models, right. It's a mouthful, so we just call it the models. And these computer simulations, these models, are computer programs that simulate the motion of the atmosphere. Well, how does a model know what the future will be like? You have to tell the model what things are like now. And you give it all kinds of information, including information from these satellite sounders. Very important. Just how important are they? We have a recent, comparatively recent study that really brings home, and this is Superstorm Sandy. We have a track image here of the track of Hurricane Sandy. It was down in the Caribbean around Cuba, and then it moved north over the ocean, offshore of the eastern seaboard, and then at the last minute, Sandy made what's called the left hook. It turned hard to the left and slammed into New Jersey. Was a major problem for the mid-Atlantic states, a calamity. It fused with another weather system and became known, this is not an official title, but Superstorm Sandy. It was quite the weather event. Well, the modelers, after the event, there's a group of modelers in Europe. They have a very good model, a frustratingly good model if you're the Americans trying to pursue their excellence. They reran their model afterwards in what's called a data denial study, where they kept everything the same. So this is 6 months after Sandy, but they went back, they reran the same model, they fed the model the same initial conditions, that is telling the model, okay, here's where we think Sandy is, down near Cuba in the Caribbean. Everything was the same as it was in the real forecast, except they didn't let the model know.
No satellite data.
No satellite data. So we're going to put that over here, no satellite data for you. The resulting forecast 5 days out, back when the real Sandy was happening and the model had the satellite data, the forecast was pretty good. We've got a graphic here on the left side. We show the forecast of where Sandy would be, and that's the red bullseye on the left. It's just south of where it actually wound up hitting. Not a bad forecast from this computer simulation, 120 hours out. On the right, you see the same model, but it didn't have the satellite data to help it understand things. And the storm is way offshore. It misses. The forecast is more accurate when the model has the satellite data. So that's the idea today we want to convey is weather satellites. They're important because they show us the pictures of where storms are. We see good examples of this. Yeah, the surveillance right now, it's great to look at those pictures. And in addition, behind the scenes, maybe not immediately obvious, but the models have to have that satellite data for them to be good forecasts. And then a meteorologist uses that information to help everyone with the forecast of where the storms will be in the future.
That is fascinating information that we can look and see where things have been, because you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. That's that old adage there. But seeing that satellites are actually helping us move forward in the weather information system is pretty amazing stuff.
You bet.
And if you want to check out Eric's satellite images that he's been talking about, whether that's something from today or last week or even much further back in Alaska history, you can easily do that yourself. Go to www.gina.alaska.edu and you can find those images there. Eric, thanks so much for joining us once again. And again, we will join you hopefully again soon for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, where you'll tell us more really cool information about the satellites over our heads in Alaska. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice, and across the Beaufort Seacoast, we're starting to see more ice forming and perhaps even lingering into the daytime hours now in between the barrier islands and the coastline. So expect more of this to form in the coming days as temperatures are certainly cooling down. You can check the latest outlook anytime you like, as well as get the map that looks similar to this at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice anytime. This update as of October 10th today. Here's a look at the forecast in Southeast now. Winds should be light and skies should be fair for many in Southeast the next couple days. You have a little bit of a stronger northwesterly flow across the outer coast. 10 to 20 knots there from the north and west, and 7 to 10 foot seas expected. There on the outside, on the inside, 2 to 3 foot seas and a gentle northerly breeze out of the Lynn Canal, 15 knots there. 10 knot winds around the Stevens Passage region with 2 foot seas continuing into Thursday. Across the outer coast, light winds, in fact, somewhat variable as you get up toward Icy Cape and Cape Fairweather. More of an easterly wind at 10 knots. 7 to 9 foot seas across the outer coast, some of your stronger northwesterly south of Sitka to the Dixon entrance on Thursday. Across south central, slightly higher winds and seas there across the north and western Gulf, 7 to 9 feet. 2 foot seas on the inside of Prince William Sound. Not a bad day. Northwesterlies there at 10 knots. Southerlies across northern Cook Inlet, and a stronger westerly push coming across the southern Cook Inlet region. 5 to 7 foot seas on a 20 to 25 knot westerly wind. Thursday, that changes up a little bit more. Southerly influences start to blow in. 5 to 8 foot sea there around the Barrens. Southerlies across the north and western Gulf. 15 knots coming up in Prince William Sound, an easterly wind, and a 3 foot sea northeasterlies in northern Cook Inlet. Now we get into the impacts from the new storm coming in across the western Bering, and you start to see a southwesterly flow around Kodiak Island. 5 to 8 foot seas on either side, 20 to 25 knot winds, and southerlies across the Alaska Peninsula. It will be blustery throughout the next 24 to 48 hours. 11 to 14 foot seas there. You can see higher seas on the Pacific coastline. As we get into Thursday, big buildup of seas out across the Bering, and the winds picking up for the Alaska Peninsula, but the seas holding back for now. 7 to 15 foot seas down the Pacific coast, 15 to 16 foot seas for the Pacific coast, I should say, 7 to 15 for the Bering, and south and southwesterlies around the Kodiak Island region with winds from 25 to 30 knots. Here's the illusions now. We have storm force winds out in the west, a high wind warning for Attu and Shemya. 29 foot seas there, the bright red colors indicating the highest seas, and you can see those coming up to about 30 to 35 feet there. South and westerlies for the rest of the chain. Winds around 35 to 40 knots. Gales with 18 to 19 foot seas on the Pacific coast and 13 to 15 foot seas for the Bering Sea coast. 24 foot seas on a 50-knot wind around Kiska. You can see the larger swells there and seas moving into the central Bering. Here are the Pribilovs here breaking the winds and the waves just a little bit. You can see southwesterlies for just about all of the chain, 30 to 40 knots in the region with 23 to 28 foot seas on the Bering Sea coast and 15 to 20 foot seas across the Pacific coast. Winds generally between 30 and 40 knots and big improvements out in the west as well. 27 foot seas around Attu with a 40-knot wind. Gales expected to continue into Thursday. For the west coast, you can see the coastal areas not doing too bad. East and southeasterly winds 35 to 40, 13 to 14 foot seas there. Look for a south and southeasterly flow around St. Matthew and the Pribilovs, 16-foot seas there with gales on Wednesday and seas coming up sharply on Thursday, 29-foot seas there with winds from the southwest at 40. Southerlies around St. Matthew, 45 knots with a 26-foot sea, and strong south and westerlies coming up the west coast. Once again, a coastal flood watch is posted for many areas north of the Yukon Delta, and high surf advisories expected across, higher surf, let's say, across southwestern Alaska. So we'll be watching for the potential for some areas to see some additional water pushed in with that southwesterly swell as we get into your Thursday afternoon. Up north, not too bad. Easterlies across the Beaufort Sea coast, 10 to 15, and across the Chukchi coast, 3 to 5 foot seas there on Wednesday. For Thursday, winds coming up sharply for the Beaufort Sea. Easterlies 30 knots with 5 to 7 foot seas, and an offshore wind strengthens from Cape Lisburne to Kivalina, 35 to 40 knots there, and also up the coast 11 foot seas with 14 foot seas outside of Kotzebue Sound, and southerlies into the Bering Strait north of St. Lawrence Island. That's a look at your marine areas. Let's take a look at the overall weather once again. A rapidly intensifying low pressure system across the western Bering Sea will move eastward, pushing some of the colder weather out of the way temporarily and ramping up the winds for the west coast. The strong south and westerly fetch will mean the chance for some coastal flooding in some areas, and again some unusual higher surf there as we go throughout the Wednesday to Thursday period. Winds continue to move in as we head into Thursday afternoon with rain for south central and rain and snow for the interior. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you right here again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.